If you have any problems, just let me know.
Okay, so we'll do. All I have to do is tap it?
Yep.
Okay.
Get down here so I get in the picture. To welcome everybody.
Is it that thing up there?
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, you look at the green light.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we're going to get going. I want to thank you all for coming back, or coming this time around. And I want to make sure that you all know that last week's session, the audio did not get recorded. So I am going to do it again tomorrow night at 7 o'clock on Zoom, so that it will get recorded and we'll be able to save it. So if you got friends or anything like that who you know might want to watch, please let them know. Or if you want to see it again, that's great. Or if and this would help the choir, because the choir wasn't able to be part of that and they're not rehearsing today. So some of them may be here. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know that will be done. I'm happy that Becky Holm is here from Seven Stones. And I'm just going to turn it over. And if there are technological issues, let me know. But I'll be sitting back at the magic desk.
Sounds good. There's definitely a lot of tech going on here. Well, thank you so much. I am just truly honored to be here. As he said, I'm Becky Holm, and I'm the director of Seven Stones Botanical Garden Cemetery. And sometimes when I say that I'm a director of a cemetery, a lot of people are taken aback. They're like, oh, you run a cemetery. Well, that's unusual. You don't meet someone who runs a cemetery every day. But as I look back on how I got from my early beginnings to where I'm at today and how I got to be running a cemetery, I can see God's hand in every single step of the way. In the late 80s, early 90s, I thought I wanted to be the first female fighter pilot, and I joined the Air Force. And I realized that very quickly that was not God's plan for me. He said, no, you're not going to be the first female fighter pilot. But that was the hook to get me into the Air Force. And that hook that got me into the Air Force allowed me to learn a lot of the things that I needed to know today in order to do a really good job and take care of families at a cemetery. I was a civil engineering section commander, so I learned how to take care of maintenance and all of that sort of stuff so that I know how to take care of grounds. And then he moved me and gave me the exact opposite job, working with ditch diggers and maintenance crews, to putting me in protocol, working with general officers and presidents and taking care of their every whim. So that allowed me to learn the art of perfection, that whenever you are doing an event, you need to be absolutely perfect, because when you're dealing with general officers and you're dealing with presidents, pretty much perfection is the only option. They don't give you any others. And it's the same with funerals and burials. You get one shot at it, one and only one shot at it to get it right, and it needs to be perfect. And so that's what I do. We try to make everything perfect out there so that the families don't have to worry about anything. Then he moved me into IT and said, you've done enough on the outside, you've done enough catering to generals, now I need you to learn all the systems and processes behind all the systems. So I moved into an IT support role, managing a small support team, and then that allowed me to move into an IT project management role when I got out into the civilian world. And so that's where I learned all of the different systems of many different disciplines out there. And you kind of need to know a little bit of everything when you're running a cemetery, because you wear all sorts of different hats all the time. He gave me lots of opportunities to be humble and find humility. He also taught me very much how service above self is the way to roll, as we say. This is the way to roll. And he also gave me the great honor of being a mom and a wife. And so that teaches you a whole different level of love and caring and unconditional love for other human beings when you're a mom and a wife. So then, bringing me up almost to today, my brother is a landscape architect, and he's been doing cemetery planning for over 30 years. And he got his dream to have a cemetery. And so a couple of gentlemen reached out to him and asked him to do a feasibility study. And he said, sure, I'll do that. And they all got along so well, they said, why don't we form a company and let's do the cemetery ourselves? And so at that point in time, they spent about 5 years getting the funds and getting the necessary legal stuff going through and all the approvals from the state and local government to do what they wanted to do. And that's when I came along. We broke ground and they said, well, we need you out here, Becky. Could you come help us run this? And I said, absolutely. I would love to come help you run this. And ever since 2016, I've been fully immersed in taking care of families, taking care of their loved ones, taking care of their hearts as they go through the grief process. I've seen God work absolutely amazing wonders through the healing process. I've seen him use time, which is wonderful. I've seen him use nature. I've seen him use compassion to soften even the most acute, heartbreaking grief. And that is incredibly humbling to be out there and be in that space all the time. Today, so now you know a little bit about me, and you know where my heart is, you know where I come from, you know how I got to where I'm here, why I'm here today with you. I love to teach people how to make that process of grief a little bit easier. And so doing things ahead of time definitely does that for family members of loved ones who've lost. So we'll be getting into some details. We'll be getting into data, checklists, kind of the nuts and bolts of things, not the heart space necessarily today, although the heart space is what brought us all here. We're going to be getting into all the details of things. And hopefully you'll see at the end of the day, the most important thing and the reason why you should pre-plan is for the hearts of your loved ones and your friends. So it takes a lot of courage. It takes bravery to face the inevitable. None of us want to face it. We think that if we're planning for it, that it might happen. And just like using birth control, that doesn't always, you're not going to get pregnant just if you use birth control, right? So it's the same concept. If you're planning for the inevitable, you're not necessarily going to die tomorrow. So I'll try and keep a little humor in this. Please feel free to interrupt me at any time. Ask me whatever questions. If I don't know something, I'll get back to you. So I've been doing this for about 8 years. Obviously, it wasn't my history and it wasn't my past and it wasn't what I was trained in, but I've learned a tremendous amount on how to do things the right way for the last 8 years. And when you guys make your wishes known, and me too, to our loved ones, we definitely help them prevent what's like the second guessing. So when someone passes away, what I see a lot with children and their parents pass away, the kids end up second guessing their decisions. They're like, I don't know what mom would have wanted. I don't know what dad would have wanted. We didn't talk about that. And so you save that, and you also save what could be worse, which is infighting amongst the siblings, that's on the worst end of things. You don't want, if you take those things, the decisions out of their hands and you put them back in your hands, then you're giving them probably the best gift you can ever give them. So, and they can focus their time and energy on remembering the stories and remembering the awesome things that mom did or dad did, rather than worrying about the details, which we're going to talk about next. So without further ado, let's see if I can manage the slides. Okay. He does such a great job with all this tech stuff. It's so wonderful. It actually is working. And coming from an IT project manager, that is not always the case. So every civilization from the beginning of time, of humans essentially, has had sacred places where they care for their dead and where they put memorials for their loved ones that they've lost. So every single culture has these three unique things. They have some type of ceremony, funeral rite or ritual. We call those memorial services or celebrations of life in this day and age. A sacred place for the dead, we call those cemeteries now. And then some sort of memorial. Oftentimes it's a monument, or it could be a tree. So it could be, it's the full gamut. In our day and age, there are so many options out there, and everything is okay. I always tell families, whatever's in your heart, let it be known, and we'll figure out how to do it for you. Or your family will figure out how to do it for you because they love you to pieces and they want to do what's right by you. So those are three very important things that kind of set the stage for what we're going to be talking about. These are a couple of pictures that I thought were really unique and interesting. So from as far back as 3000 BC, people were taking care of their loved ones. And this Newgrange burial mound was in Ireland, and that's the oldest building that was ever constructed, was for the dead. In Giza, Great Pyramids of Giza, that's another very interesting place to care for the dead. There's a pyramid built for each of their kings. So one is the Pyramid of Khufu, Pyramid of Khafre, and I'm going to totally butcher these names, Pyramid of Menkaure, and each pyramid is actually a single tomb constructed for an Egyptian king, which is fascinating, I think. Coming up to today, we'll move forward a little bit. Some of the cemetery trends that people are seeing today really complement the past and the future. And so for the last 25 years, customers have really been focusing on trying to get more green with their options. And so the cemetery and funeral industry is no different. So everyone wants to go green. Everybody wants to save the planet, save the earth, preserve our nature, all of those good things for our future generations. And the funeral industry wants to do that as well. So one of the things that we've seen is a huge uptick in cremation. You'll see in the handouts that I gave you on the second page at the top, sort of gives you a little picture, a snapshot of trends of burial versus cremation for the last 5 years or so, since 2018. So that's kind of interesting to see. This is on a percentage basis. So you're looking at, in 2018, it was a little over 20% to a little under 80% of burial versus cremation. And we're seeing it pretty much stay somewhat the same, although I will tell you a very interesting thing that you notice that the burial is upticking just a little bit. The burial is upticking a little bit because there's green burial options. So people can go back into the ground, like Jewish traditions have always gone just straight into the ground, back to nature, without vaults, without any kind of metal or anything like that. So with those kinds of options becoming more available, you're seeing a little bit of uptick of burial. So I find that very interesting. Not huge amounts, but just a little bit. So that brings me to a second point, the return to natural and green burials. Continuously innovating with new technologies such as natural reduction and alkaline hydrolysis. And I'll explain what both of those are in a little bit. Just recently, in the last 2 years, Colorado has actually changed their Colorado statutes to allow for natural reduction. And so that's kind of a fascinating and interesting, and depending on your perspective, a different way of taking care of your final disposition. And then other non-traditional options exist as well. You can become a piece of jewelry. They can take a little bit of your cremains and turn it into a diamond. You can become part of a coral reef. They can take all of your cremains out and put you right onto a coral reef so that you are feeding the coral reef and in the ocean. You can be scattered from an airplane. So you can be shot out of a cannon or a gun. Like, there's all sorts of very different and unique ways that people want to have their final disposition. May not be what anyone in this room wants, but they're out there. So on the very first page of what I gave you, this Colorado state statutes. So about 6 months ago or so, I was asked by the newest incoming coroners of the state of Colorado if I would give a presentation on green burial. And so I had to do a lot of research to find out all the statutes in the state statutes to figure out what that all looks like. And so just so you guys have them as handy reference in case you ever want to go look this stuff up if you're really bored, to see what definitions are according to the state statutes for disposition, natural reduction, ossuary, cremated remains, human remains, last remains, declarations, grave space, interment, and memorial. Those are the ones that I kind of highlighted here at the top. Those are sort of definitions that it's helpful that people are on the same page with what that means when they're talking about end of life. Some of the things, I'm sure that every single one of us is aware of what has happened in Colorado Springs over the last couple of months with a unreputable funeral home and criminal has done some awful things to families who've lost their loved ones. It's my understanding that there were 190 people that were found on site there, and that only 110 of them so far have been identified. So I have a good friend who's a coroner for Douglas County, and she's been down there pretty much nonstop for 3 months. So I just want to highlight how they broke the law. It's not that we need any more laws, we just need people to follow the laws. Funeral establishments shall embalm, refrigerate, cremate, bury, or entomb human remains within 24 hours after taking custody of them. So leaving them there for months on end without any refrigeration or without any embalming, saying it was green, was just flat out against the law. So I just wanted to point that out for you guys so you know. And I will tell you that funeral homes that we work with, that I've come in contact with, none of them would ever even dream of doing something like this. So it does help to do your research, talk to other family members, talk to other friends to see how they've worked with funeral homes and they've worked with cemeteries. Get your friends' feedback on stuff. I do think that that is helpful when you're making a decision, and there's nothing that says you can't shop around. So you want to feel comfortable with whoever you're working with when you're dealing on the worst days of your life, the absolute worst days of your life. You want to know 100% that you're not being taken advantage of. So you have the right to shop around. Just want to say that right now. Don't ever feel like you can't get up and walk right out of whatever room you're in. Final disposition, that definition is kind of important. It means the disposition of human remains by entombment, burial, cremation, natural reduction, or removal from the state. And so the reason why I point this out is cremation is kind of interesting. You do not have to have a burial permit to place cremains somewhere. You do have to have a burial permit to place a full body somewhere. At the point of cremation, and when those cremains are given to, actually at the point of cremation, that is technically called final disposition. So whether or not a person's cremains are actually retrieved from the funeral home or retrieved from somewhere, the final disposition is actually at the point of cremation. Unfortunately, sadly, heartbreakingly, all of those things, there are some people whose cremains are not retrieved and they are just left at the funeral home. They are never picked up. They've already been paid for. There's no reason not to come pick them up. But for years and years and years, every single funeral director I've ever run across says that they have cremains that are unretrieved for a variety of different reasons. I'm sure anger is one of them, right? Anger at the person who passed away for whatever reason, and the inability to forgive. So one of the things that we do at Seven Stones is we will work with any funeral director who asks us to, or any coroner who has unretrieved cremains, that they are welcome to bring them to us, and we will place them very honorably in our ossuary, which is a communal scattering container in the ground for many people's ashes, and we will place them there for free. They don't have to do anything.
Is there a period of time that they must be retained until?
I don't think there is by law, but I will say most people will maintain them for at least 7 years, usually. And they will do everything in their power to find a next of kin, to reach out to the next of kin, and they usually have documentation of all the attempts that they've made and all of that to try and do that. But technically, the point of cremation is the point of disposition. So it's incumbent on you to go get those cremains.
I just want to jump in on two things. One is, if you ask a question, please speak up, so that gets recorded, and if you could repeat the question just in case.
Yep, I can do that.
So, thank you.
Should I repeat it now?
No,
Okay, since you were close to the front row. Natural reduction is the new definition that was added into the state statutes, or naturally reduce. It means the contained accelerated conversion of human remains into soil. And so it's essentially composting, and it's turning the human body and doing what nature naturally does, but doing it a lot faster. There are some rules and regulations about where a person, that soil and that compost can actually be placed, and that you'll see that on these notes that I have here, just below the red letters. It says that you cannot sell or offer to sell the soil produced by natural reduction of human remains to any person, so it cannot be sold. And you cannot use it in the course of the business, the vocation, the occupation, any of that soil produced by natural reduction of human remains to grow food or for human consumption. But it doesn't say you can't use it to grow food for animal consumption. So I'm just pointing that out as a point of reference so that you understand where your natural reduction, if someone chooses to do that and to go down that path of human composting, it can be used to grow food that can be given to animals. So it's just interesting. Yes?
What is used to speed up that composting process?
So the question is, what is used to speed up the composting process? And I wish I knew all of it. It's a lot of microbes. I will tell you a little, actually, hold please. I might have the answer right here. I'm going to read it because you got to be precise here. Simple method of body composting transforms the human remains into soil. The process occurs in a vessel that is safely sheltered in an environmentally controlled facility over the course of a few months. Natural microbial activity converts the body into a rich, organic, life-giving soil. The temperature in the vessel naturally rises during the body composting process. This sterilizes and stabilizes the contents as the conversion takes place. Once the reduction process is complete, about a cubic yard of soil remains. We can return this to families or donate it to farms. The Natural Funeral actively supports the introduction. This is the organization that helped do this, Natural Funeral Company. They helped introduce the legislation to legalize the body composting here, which became legal in 2021. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
And I'll have a picture of it here in a little bit on the slides. Does anyone else have any questions about natural reduction?
Is that the same as alkaline hydrolysis?
It is not the same as alkaline. It is not alkaline hydrolysis. So the difference is, so the question is it the same as alkaline hydrolysis? I'll just read that, and then we don't even have to read these slides later.
Sure.
So this natural funeral does that as well. And it's called water cremation, uses mainly water and alkaline compounds such as potassium hydroxide or potash to do what would happen naturally over a longer period with a natural burial. Our bodies become fertilizer for the earth. The reduction of the physical remains to bones happens over a few hours in a water cremation vessel that has a gentle rocking motion. At the end of the alkaline hydrolysis process, the pH is adjusted. All pathogens are neutralized and rendered harmless. Any implants are recycled, and the resulting liquid is a sterile and nutrient-rich biofertilizer. Bones remain just as with flame cremation and can be returned to the family in the familiar cremains form. So that's the difference between those two methods. And they're, I would say, some of the newest methods here in Colorado that are becoming more available in the Denver metro area. As far as alkaline hydrolysis goes, it's been around for a very long time because farmers used to use the alkaline hydrolysis method to make sure that their animals that have died, their livestock that have died, don't spread any diseases to the other livestock or in their farm. And so they would do that method with them to make sure that they were also rendered harmless to the environment. So that's been around for a really, really long time, early 1900s. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
I told you we were going to get into the nuts and bolts. You probably didn't think that nutty and bolty. All right, next slide. Oops, I forgot to move my slide forward to talk about final disposition and natural reduction, but you guys can read that up there. So state rules regarding burial or cremation, you basically, in a nutshell, you need to get approval from whatever landowner wherever you want to either scatter ashes or wherever you want to place a body. You have to get approval from that landowner to do that. And so at a cemetery, it's all very seamless. There's a burial permit that is obtained by the funeral director, handed to the cemetery. The family purchases a plot at the cemetery, and then that's how that works. If you want to scatter your ashes up in the mountains or on any other property that isn't owned by you personally, then you need to get approval from the landowner. And like in Rocky Mountain National Park, I have a link a little bit later for you. If anyone wants to scatter in Rocky Mountain National Park, there's a whole process online to get approval to go and do that. They have specific areas and where you can do that and specific ways in which you should do that. One of those ways is to not just dump all the cremains in one little spot because it takes a very long time for them to dissipate if you do that. Another way is they don't want you 200 yards or 200 feet, I can't remember which, I have it in here later, within a water source. So you need to stay a little bit away from a water source. One thing that I have learned is that cremains are very acidic, and unless your plants or any plant that you're putting them on likes acid or is very good with acidic environments, like roses actually love acidic environments. Most other plants, if you put cremains on them or around them, you could possibly kill them, especially in large quantity. So a little bit here and there won't matter, but in large quantity, it could do some damage. All right, I pulled together, did a quick Google search for you guys. So the question is, how do I find a funeral home? How do I find a cemetery? How do I even go about doing this? Well, we have everything at our fingertips. You can start by Googling and going to the internet and seeing what your options are out there. You can also always talk to your friends and see who's gone before you down this journey. I just did a quick, there are so many that I thought I would just do a Google search of 4 or higher for you. 4, 4.5, and 5s are on this list. And so you can see they're spread all around through the metro area. These are the cemeteries that offered a little bit of everything. And so if you look at the main types of disposition in a cemetery, you've got traditional, you've got cremation, traditional burial, casket burial, you've got cremation, and then you've also got green. And within each one of those, there's a couple of different variables. So like for instance, with traditional, it could be below ground or above ground. And so if you look at this little sheet of paper, that second sheet on the bottom of where the burial and cremation statistics were, it gives you sort of the above ground, below ground, and all the different variables and things to choose from, if you will. And this little quick checklist here, which I also included on the back of page 2 after all of the legalese of the state rules and Tri-County Health, what a health department does and all of that sort of thing. I have this list of cemeteries there for you guys. I just did it, I didn't do it in alphabetical order. I did it north to south, west to east. So it's not in any kind of order. We happen to be on the very south side, which is why I put 7 stones at the bottom. There's not a lot of true green options for cemeteries in the Denver metro area. That is something that the Tri-County Health Department, we had to work with them to get approval for, and they gave us certain parameters in which that we needed to accommodate. And one of their main focuses is on making sure that the bodies are deep enough. They're at the optimum depth for decomposition, but they're deep enough to make sure that there are no odors and to make sure that no animals would ever want to come and disinter without permission.
So they're not the typical 6 foot?
It's not the typical 6 foot. It's right about 4 feet. 4 feet, 4.5 feet. It kind of depends on where it is, if it's on a hill, that sort of thing. But that gives the required 18 inches of dirt above the top of whatever the vessel is. So that's really the only rule in Colorado, is you got to have 18 inches of dirt on top of whatever vessel it is that you're putting in the ground. And that should prevent all of those things. All right. These are a few cemeteries that do green around the whole state. So just so you get a feel for not just in the Denver metro area, the GBC, just so you know, there's a organization called the Green Burial Council. And what the Green Burial Council does is it will come in and it'll certify a cemetery for green. Some people like Crestone, they're fully certified green burial. They can do pyre burns down there. They can do all sorts of interesting things. The Colorado Berry Preserve in Florence is also green burial certified. They are 100% green. So if you wanted to be in a casket, fully sealed up and in a vault, and your spouse wanted to be green buried, you cannot be in the same place in somewhere like that. You both have to choose the same disposition if you're going to go there, and it both has to be green. So that's one benefit for some people, that it's 100% green, but drawback for other people because it doesn't afford the ability to choose whatever you want. Roselawn Cemetery is a hybrid way up north in Fort Collins, and they got green burial certified in this particular area. But the rest of their cemetery is completely, it's so old, it's a very old cemetery. And so it's done a very traditional way in the rest of the cemetery. But in that one section, they follow all the certain green principles. At Seven Stones, just so you know, for us, we decided that we were not going to get certified by Green Burial, by the Green Burial certification, because we just have way too many families that want both. I have a husband who wants one thing and a wife who wants another thing, or kids want one thing. And we never wanted to have to segregate. We don't want to segregate religions. We don't want to segregate types of burials. It's a big melting pot. And so we firmly believe whatever's in your heart is what we want to do for the people that come to Seven Stones. So that's green burial around the state. And there's also a lot of little cemeteries in Colorado that do green burial just by nature. So like when you're driving out, like say to Fort Morgan or something, and you see along I-76 off in the distance, just a little bit off, you might see a little metal thing that says cemetery across the top. They're very old prairie cemeteries. Pretty much anything goes in those cemeteries. They do green just by nature. Most of them will not do, and don't even have the option to do a vault in those cemeteries. All right, funeral homes. Even though I'm not a funeral home, I can talk a little bit about it, just enough, and I can answer any questions that you guys might have. Again, I did 4.4 or higher on the Google rating, and north to south, west to east, not in any kind of order. Natural Funeral happens to be the farthest north because they're in Louisville, in the Denver metro area, and Ponderosa Valley is the farthest southeast, and they're in Parker. And so there's all sorts of funeral homes in between. We've worked with almost all of them. The ones that we work with the most in the south area are Heffelbauer, Ellis Family Services, Horan and McConaty, and Olinger. So that's generally, Drink Wine sometimes will send people down to us as well.
I have a question on
Yeah.
this. Do they, I know there's a big controversy now about regulation in the industry, you know, it probably is time to talk about that. But as far as cemeteries go, do they have to put up bonds or funds so that they're perpetual?
Oh, yes.
Maintained?
Any new cemetery that is created, well, I don't even know when the laws change, but any new cemeteries that's created, you have to do a perpetual care fund. And so what we do at Seven Stones is a little bit of every sale, that state mandated amount of every sale goes into the perpetual care fund that gets invested and grows year over year over year over year. And every cemetery, most every cemetery is a perpetual care
And that's
cemetery.
third-party managed, so you can't sneak the funds away?
Yep.
I mean, you know,
Yep, exactly.
based upon, Colorado Springs, it is appropriate to ask those questions.
It surely is,
All right.
absolutely.
Thumbs up.
I don't think any question is a dumb question. All right. Oh, I forgot to move that forward. Sorry. Natural Funeral down to Ponderosa Valley. Those are the funeral homes in the metro area. There was one other funeral home that was in Littleton area, and they have since closed their doors. I would just, part of it is see how long they've been in business when it comes to a funeral home. See how many people they serve in a year, and definitely check their ratings online, because people are not shy about saying when they're unhappy, especially in this space, right? So that is a very good way to protect yourself from bad things happening. So just to give you, because we've had a lot of words, thought I'd mix it up with some pictures. These are pictures of natural and green burial grounds, photos of things that are, this is down in Florence, the natural burial grounds down in Florence. And then this is some actual burials taking place where people will go down there and dig the grave themselves, lower their loved one in the ground themselves, and completely close the grave themselves. And we also offer families the option to do that if they want to. They do need to sign a little waiver, but everyone's got to do that these days, right? But I actually had a family last year who wanted to dig the whole grave for their mom and then completely cover it back up again, which was pretty special time for the family and very cathartic, to be quite honest with you. And they weren't Jewish, so they didn't. It was just.
That takes a long time.
It does, yeah. We started a day or two in advance. They did allow our team to help as well. Like our team shoveled wheelbarrowed the dirt away for them. So, but yeah, it was hard. The hybrid, this is a picture of the hybrid cemetery up north in Fort Collins. It shows you a little bit of how that looks. And then down at Seven Stones, this is the view and a couple of green burials that we did. We had one family, the bottom one with all the pictures on it. It was a young girl who was special needs, and she lived in a home, and all of her friends that were there, her mom and dad, wanted to take her casket there, not with her in it, but take the casket there for them to decorate it before she was put in it. And then that was another family that wanted to actually fill every last ounce of dirt into the ground themselves. So they did all of it, the shoveling of it, the wheelbarrowing of it, and it was a very snowy day. We had about that much snow on the ground. You can kind of see from the background there, there's quite a bit of snow. But it was special for them. This is another one, just to kind of show you how it looked before the casket went into the ground, and then after the casket was in the ground, and then after it was all closed up, we put some rose petals on the spot on the top left-hand corner is what it looks like after it was closed up. And you'll notice in that picture, you can really see very clearly the redwood. So one of the things that we do, let me back up. One of the main reasons why cemeteries started industrializing so much is and putting vaults in the ground is because decomposition caused the ground to go like this. And B, they found out over time that bones kind of migrated a little bit, especially if they were in a big casket, and it took a while for that casket to go down, and then the bones would migrate once the casket actually deteriorated. And they may not have had as good of controls for every casket burial space in the olden days. They may not have even written down where someone was buried, and so you start digging and you find somebody, and that's not good. So there's a lot of controls that have been put in place in recent, I would say in the last 50 years, to try to make sure that someone who's in the ground stays in the ground right where you put them and they're not disturbed. And so that's why vaults and all of those things were put in place. And then big equipment started being manufactured, and then they started using very large equipment to run over and dig the graves with big backhoes. And that also caused a little bit of sinkage, or possibly caused the caskets to, sink from the weight from the top. As we all know, over time, all of it's going back to nature. Like, give it enough time, everything is going back to nature. We cannot hold back nature for that long. But what we do for our green burials is we put redwood in to line the grave down at the bottom, so that as that decomposition happens and the bones settle, then they stay right where they're supposed to be, because that redwood is going to decompose much, much, much slower than a wicker casket or willow casket or a pine box. Any questions on that? Okay. The one thing that has also been very interesting in the last decade, people want to have their ashes feed something. They want to feed a tree. They want to feed a plant. They want to continue living. So very logical, actually. We all want to continue living. We especially want to continue living in the hearts and minds of our loved ones. So one thing that we came up with, it's very, it's not good business to have one tree and one set of cremains, because that's the whole, you cannot put anything out in that wingspan of where that tree is going to grow. And that takes up an awful lot of square footage. So one of the creative things that my brother came up with was to allow families to have that same desire, where we put the tree in the middle and we put 12 sets of cremains at 4 or 6 feet away from the trunk of the tree. And so we call them our sundial maple or sundial spruce option. And that allows families to have their cremains go down into the ground in a super green way. Sometimes we mix them with a proprietary mix that takes that acidity out. And they go down at about 3 foot depth. And then nature, the roots of the tree will eventually get out to them. But because we've added the proprietary mix to it, it won't hurt the tree at all. And then when the tree dies, because it's a living thing and it will die, we'll take that tree out and put a new one right in the middle. But their ashes are far enough away so that they maintain where they're located in the gardens.
So you've designed this. Has anybody else been allowed to use it? The design?
I don't know. If someone wants to use it, we haven't patented it or anything. I guess we could. So I guess the highest form of flattery is copying, right? So, I think it's just it's a great way to do. I don't know of anyone else that's doing it, but they could, I suppose.
I taught death and dying at Regis for a number of years, and John Horan.
Oh, yes.
Because we usually would go to one of the Horan companies. And he said 2 things that I thought were very interesting. One was that at the time, and I don't think that it's probably still happened, that the funeral industry needed to be regulated. And he very much fought for that. And this was back in the 90s.
Interesting.
Very much fought for that, so that the kinds of things that happen in Colorado Springs, there would be regulation. And so
well, there are regulations, but people broke the laws. So it was right. I'm sure he probably had something to do with that regulation.
And the other thing that I learned in that process of visiting various places is that one of the things that they said in terms of scattering ashes is that so many people wanted to have a place to know, and the tree
where to go
you just described is one. So if the whole family would know that there was a place.
Exactly.
Not just somewhere.
Exactly. And some people want to have their ashes scattered on top of a 14er. But as they get closer to the end of life, they change their mind. They're like, who's going to go up there and visit me? Right? No one's going to go up to that 14er again and visit me. I don't even know if my grandkids could make it up there. So my brother actually sat on the board of Horan and McConaty for a long time. He was good friends with John Horan. And he is the one who first designed their cremation gardens that they have. So their one at County Line and their one at Iliff and Parker were designed by my brother before he did this, which is kind of neat. And now he sits on the board of Fairmont. So he definitely knows his stuff. Any questions on green placements? Look at that. I already read alkaline hydrolysis. Oh, yes.
I missed the part. What's the distance between the tree and where you scatter the gases?
It's 4 or 6 feet. It depends on the type of tree that it is. A deciduous tree, we do 4 feet. The non-deciduous trees, the evergreens and such, we do 6 feet if we can. Or it might be in there a little bit if we're too close to another tree, then we'll scope it back to 5 feet. So, yeah. We already read about alkaline hydrolysis, which is another method, and natural reduction. And then here, I promised you a picture of the natural reduction device that they have created that turns the human body into compost. That's what that looks like.
Yeah, what kind of time do you say it runs?
It's a couple of months. I think it's 3 to 6 months.
It doesn't degrade the bones, does it?
No, it does on that.
It does on that process?
Yeah.
Wow.
It doesn't on alkaline hydrolysis, but it does on human composting, on the natural
So
reduction.
you get like a cubic yard?
A cubic yard of,
What do you do? Does it carry down or?
well, it depends on what the family wants done with that. Like some people have it in their heart that they want to go continue life, and so they want to actually donate it to a farm, so then it will be used to fertilize, food, growing of food for animals. Some people, we have said that at our cemetery, if someone wants to bring their compost to us, we can place it in a grave space, just like we would place the human body, but we cannot go on top of everything, because in our minds, using it to fertilize where other people are buried is like layering, right? We don't want to layer people, especially people who don't know each other. If you're with your husband and you're layered, that's fine, right? You can fight over who's going to be on top.
I see you require cremation burial urn or not.
What's that?
Some cemeteries require their urn for cremation, and you place it in the ground for a marker.
It depends on the cemetery, correct. Like in our cemetery, we include the urn with every purchase, and we use the simple scattering urns from Passages, which they're made out of cardboard. They're actually technically biodegradable, but we place them, it depends on where it is in the cemetery, but in our cremation garden, where all of the monuments are right next to the spot where you're going to place the cremains, we have what we call a urn chamber there, which is made out of PVC pipe. It has a lid on it. So similar to how the redwood is in your casket space, that PVC pipe is going to keep those cremains in that spot forever. And the PVC lid has a number on it, etched on top of it, so you know what plot number it is. So anyone who's opening up that in the future can match it to the map and say, oh yeah, that person is right there in that spot. And that's below ground.
We have about 10 more minutes.
Okay, sounds good. I'm almost done. These are the alternative, even more alternative than the others that we've talked about. Scattering, I looked up a couple of places and in Colorado that actually do air scattering from the plane. And they seem like really amazing. One's a family owned who's been doing it for years. And it's kind of neat. So being an old Air Force girl, that kind of is somewhat appealing to me. Eternal Reefs, I put the link on here for Eternal Reefs, put the link on here to Rocky Mountain National Park, and you'll see that at the bottom of the first sheet. It has that's this slide on it with the link, so you have access to that. And then if you Google or search anywhere on the internet for cremation jewelry, you will find a plethora of stuff. I do know families who have just gone online and bought the jewelry themselves, and then they'll ask the funeral home, or they'll ask us to, or they'll do it themselves to place cremains in the jewelry and to give to everybody. You can also ask if you have, like, you want to turn into a jewel or turn into something else, like a paperweight or something like that. There's everything out there. You can talk to your funeral director about that. They have all sorts of very reputable services.
I remember a number of years ago listening to something or talking to somebody, and they gave the remains to a potter.
Oh, yes.
Mixed it into clay.
Absolutely.
That way, every member of the family had a plate or a salad bowl.
That's another really good one on here. I should find that and look it up for you. So as creative as you want to get, you can get, is the bottom line to that story, right? So this is just a few numbers, high level order of magnitude. Now I did extrapolate out because I could not find the same report that I had pulled all of these numbers from years ago, from 1960 to 2010, that had come directly from a 2010 NFDA source. And so I extrapolated out because it kind of seems to me the pattern of looking at all those numbers is it kind of 1.5 to 2 times as much about every decade or so is how it seems to be increasing in cost. So I'm just giving you guys this order of magnitude so that you're not surprised or shocked when you get out and start looking at these things.
Can you comment on prepaid funeral plans?
Mm-hmm. So there's prepaid, pre-planning, and then just pre-arranging. So there's 3 things, pre-planning is just making sure that the funeral home has all of your information, you haven't given them any money. Prepaying is making sure they have all the information and you've given them money. And then there's also an insurance product that you can get out there at a funeral home that allows you to put all your wishes down, get all the information to the funeral home, and then it's an insurance policy that will pay out upon your death to the funeral home to pay for the services that they have. For a cemetery, for us, what we have done is whatever we can deliver to you today, we will. And whatever is a future cost, we typically will not take your money for it right now. So if you want to have engraving done, if you pick a spot, for us, we include the headstone with the space. So you've got your headstone delivered, your space delivered with your name on it, and then you could engrave and do pre-planning engraving if you would like to. But then at the time of need, there's some other small charges like date of passing, opening and closing to place your cremains in, and then any kind of money that you would want to put out for a small service, like for facility use fees for a small service or a large service. I've done 450 people, I've done 2 people. So, it's the full gamut of what a family wants that what Seven Stones can deliver out there as far as a service goes. So that gives you an idea of pricing. And then these are the facts. There's so many tasks and decisions that have to be made. Someone did this one time. They listed every single one of them. I took this from a source and I can't remember where it was, but 87 tasks that have to be done by the survivors after a death occurs. I think there's more than that. I think that's a little low, to be honest with you. All the records, funeral arrangements, cemetery arrangements, financial arrangements, all of those things. And then there's the heart space. Like that's just the nuts and bolts of things. Then there's the whole heart thing tied to the loss and the grief. And some of the research that's been done shows that purchases made at the time of death, 33% of the time are made by husbands, and 67% of the time are made by widows and children. So women and children are living longer. That's the rule of thumb there. And what I usually encounter is, generally speaking, and this is not to cast dispersions or anything like that, men don't want to think about this. They just don't want to think about it. What I usually find after a couple will come in, after the wife has drug him in finally, and he'll leave and he'll go, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. That was kind of fun. Am I allowed to say it was fun to buy a plot? I'm like, you can say whatever you want to say. I'm just glad that you had a good experience here, that it wasn't horrendous and that we broke your mold, what you thought buying a plot was all about. So it's really deciding how you want to be remembered. So, and then sharing that with someone. So be brave this holiday season. Think about some things. Have the talk of a lifetime with your loved ones, and then make some of these key decisions. So these key decisions will help your loved ones without fail. They will feel they can just focus on trying to get over the loss of you without worrying about all these other decisions and things that they've got to make. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes,
Is there a meaning behind your name, Seven Stones?
there is. There is. So all of you know in this room, 7 is the number of perfection in the Bible. It's also very important in many faiths, not just Christianity. 7 wonders of the world, lucky number 7. 7 is just a great number, but mostly it's the number of perfection in the Bible. And stones are a representation of strength, foundation, everlasting, not building our house on sand. We're building it on stones. And so that's how we came up with that name. Mhm.
If you're traveling and for some reason you pass away in another country,
Mhm. That is where insurance comes into play. Oh, the question is, if you're traveling and you pass away in another country, what do you do? So pre-planning with an insurance product, I would say, is probably your best recommendation. So most insurance products have a rider on there so that if you pass away outside of the state, then they will pay the benefit for you to be cremated and brought back home. If you want to be casket buried, your family is going to have to pay for that. And that's not a small fee to work with, especially a foreign country. I had a family who lost their son who was living in India, and it took a very long time for him to get his body from India through customs to the United States to be buried here. So, and they didn't have the insurance, so they had to pay for it all out of pocket. So the insurance is helpful on that, on those kinds of fronts. If you're doing a lot of planning in a lot of traveling in your later years, definitely consider getting the insurance product with the travel benefit on it. Did that answer your question?
yes.
Okay.
To add to that, AAA has a policy just for that purpose.
Oh,
Whether it's for medical emergency or transportation of the body.
tell me your name.
Beverly?
Beverly said that AAA has a policy just for that purpose. For those of you who are online, might not have heard that. Thank you for sharing that. Any other questions? You guys have been absolutely delightful and wonderful. Thank you for making me feel so welcome.